About half of young men report feeling constant insecurity about their decisions and abilities. Machiavelli would have called this an avoidable tragedy. He discovered that confidence isn't a feeling, it's a system, a set of principles you can master to never doubt your own worth again. I'll teach you these rules that have worked for over 500 years. About half of young men report feeling constant insecurity about their decisions and abilities. Machiavelli would have called this an avoidable tragedy. He discovered that confidence isn't a feeling, it's a system, a set of principles you can master to never doubt your own worth again. I'll teach you these rules that have worked for over 500 years. Last week, a guy told me he lost a promotion because he was thinking about whether it was the right time to talk to the boss. While he analyzed the perfect moment, another employee simply scheduled the meeting and got the position. Machiavelli observed something brutal about human nature. The vast majority of people live waiting for someone to give them permission to act. Permission to disagree in a meeting, permission to approach that woman, permission to start that project, permission to exist the way they are. This is the first killer of male confidence. The belief that you need external validation before moving. While you wait for the perfect moment, ideal conditions, approval from others, less qualified individuals are taking the opportunities you think you deserve. The first Machiavellian rule for unshakable self-confidence is simple. Imperfect action always beats perfect inaction. You don't need to be 100% prepared. You don't need absolute certainty. You don't need everyone to agree with you. What you need is to accept that hesitation is a choice, and every time you choose to wait, you're choosing to hand your power over to circumstances. Confident men aren't braver than you. They simply understood that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action, despite fear. But this is just the beginning. Because after you stop waiting for permission, an even bigger problem emerges, the fear that people won't like your decisions. Have you ever noticed how certain men can maintain firm positions even when everyone is against them, while others crumble at the first criticism or change their opinion to please whoever is present? Marcus Aurelius faced this in the extreme. Imagine being emperor of Rome and having to make decisions you know will cause revolt in much of the empire. Decisions about war, taxes, policies affecting millions of people. He knew every choice would create powerful enemies. In his personal reflections, which we now know as meditations, he wrote something revealing about this constant pressure. The temptation to modify correct decisions to avoid conflict was what most threatened his integrity as a leader. Aurelius discovered there's a fundamental difference between men who maintain respect and those who lose it quickly. It's not about arrogance or stubbornness, it's about something most modern men have completely lost. When you always agree to avoid friction, when you change positions depending on who's listening, when you avoid expressing convictions to keep the peace, you think you're being diplomatic. Actually, you're signaling something very specific to the world. The philosopher-emperor noticed that people develop an instinctive perception about men who do this. They may not be able to explain exactly what they feel, but they know something is missing. A solidity, a foundation. Aurelius faced revolts. Aurelius, betrayals, devastating criticism from senators and philosophers, but he maintained his convictions because he understood a deep psychological truth. Respect doesn't come from consensus, it comes from consistency. He observed that when you're afraid of displeasing, you unconsciously communicate that your approval is available to whoever knows how to press the right buttons. And that doesn't generate respect, it generates unconscious contempt. The principle Aurelius developed about this was direct. A man who tries to please everyone pleases no one truly, because people feel instinctively that his opinions don't come from genuine conviction, but from need for acceptance. This discovery became the foundation of how he maintained authority even in the worst political crises. But there's an even bigger problem that emerges when you stop seeking constant approval. Epictetus was born into a slave family in Hierapolis and grew up with a physical disability in his leg that accompanied him his entire life. This limitation, which many would see as a disadvantage, became the laboratory where he developed one of the most powerful discoveries about mental strength in human history. While other slaves revolted internally against their condition, Epictetus did something different. He began observing his own mind, especially in moments of greatest physical difficulty. During long hours of forced labor, carrying weight with his injured leg, he noticed something extraordinary. His mind could separate itself from pain. He could observe suffering as if watching from outside, without completely identifying with it. The leg hurt, but something inside him remained intact, unshakable. Most men live in the illusion that confidence means controlling outcomes. They believe that to feel secure, they need to guarantee everything goes as planned, that people react as expected, that circumstances are favorable. When this doesn't happen, and it rarely does, they crumble. Epictetus realized something different there on the ground with his broken leg. There's only one thing you completely control: your response to what happens to you. Everything else, others' opinions, results of your efforts, external circumstances, is outside your real domain. From this brutal revelation, he developed what he called inner fortress. It was a type of confidence that didn't depend on external success, social approval, or favorable circumstances. It depended only on your ability to choose your reactions. Years later, when he became one of Rome's most respected philosophers, Epictetus taught something that completely challenges our modern idea of self-confidence. No man is free until he is master of himself. He discovered that truly confident men aren't those who can control the world around them. They're those who developed absolute mastery over the internal world. Thoughts, emotions, reactions, interpretations. This fundamental distinction separates genuine confidence from superficial arrogance. Arrogance needs constant validation from the external world. Real confidence operates independently of external feedback, but mastering the internal world requires something most modern men avoid at all costs: facing uncomfortable truths about themselves. Socrates made an observation that exposed something disturbing about human nature. During the conflicts that ravaged Athens throughout his life, he noticed a strange pattern in people's behavior around him. Those who seemed most self-assured in times of peace were the first to panic when reality got hard, while others, who were quieter and more reflective, remained stable even in the worst circumstances. This intrigued him deeply. Why did apparently strong men crumble so quickly when tested? The answer Socrates found created the foundation of everything we know about genuine self-knowledge. Most men build confidence on false foundations. They base it on temporary successes, praise from other people, external achievements that can be lost at any moment. When these external foundations shake, and they always shake, the entire confidence structure collapses with them. Have you been through this? Moments where something you considered certain about yourself was questioned, and you became completely lost. Where a criticism, rejection, or failure made you doubt everything. Socrates realized there's a brutal difference between knowing your abilities and knowing your limits. The first makes you vulnerable because it's based on performance. The second makes you unshakable because it's based on reality. When you know exactly where your weak points are, when you accept your limitations without drama, when you stop pretending to be something you're not, something interesting happens. You become immune to external attacks. Why? Because no one can tell you something about yourself that you don't already know and accept. Socrates famously said, "Know thyself," but he wasn't talking about discovering your talents. He was talking about mapping your weaknesses with surgical precision. This brutal honesty with yourself became the foundation of his legendary confidence. He could debate with anyone because he had no ego to defend. He could admit ignorance because he didn't pretend to know everything. Socratic self-knowledge isn't about self-esteem, it's about radical authenticity, and radical authenticity frees you from the need to impress anyone. Friedrich Nietzsche spent 10 years of his life in almost total isolation in the Swiss Alps, dealing with devastating headaches that left him incapacitated for days. During these years of physical suffering and solitude, he made a disturbing observation about how men deal with adversity. He noticed there are two types of reaction to suffering. The first is what he called herd mentality, where the man becomes bitter, blames the world, seeks sympathy, and sees himself as a victim of circumstances. The second was something completely different. Nietzsche meticulously documented how some people, a very small minority, used suffering as raw material for something greater. They didn't deny the pain, didn't pretend everything was fine, but also didn't allow themselves to be defined by it. During his most intense crises, when he could barely write due to pain, Nietzsche began developing the concept that would appear in Thus Spoke Zarathustra and become central to understanding genuine resilience. Amor fati, love of fate. It wasn't about liking suffering or being masochistic. It was about something much more radical and difficult. Can you imagine looking at the worst moments of your life, the rejections, failures, humiliations, and saying, "I wouldn't change any of this"? Not because it was good, but because it was necessary for you to become who you are. Most men spend enormous mental energy trying to avoid deny or resent the difficulties they've faced. Nietzsche realized that this mental resistance to what has already happened is what really breaks the masculine spirit. When you completely accept your history, including the parts you'd prefer to forget, something powerful happens. You stop spending energy fighting against realities you can't change and direct all that force toward what you can still influence. Nietzsche and amor fati isn't passivity. It's recognition that your current strength was forged exactly through the difficulties you faced. Without them, you would be weaker, not stronger. This radical acceptance of your complete journey, including the painful parts, becomes the foundation of a confidence that no new adversity can shake. Do you agree with this or think it's weak talk? I want to see your argument in the comments. Did you know there's a simple way to double your ability to make difficult decisions? Arthur Schopenhauer discovered this by accident when he developed an obsession everyone thought was bizarre. For many years, he followed a very structured routine, woke up at the same time, walked similar routes, frequented the same establishments. People thought he was crazy, but Schopenhauer was conducting a psychological experiment without realizing it, and the result was something that completely changed our understanding of how our mind sabotages our self-confidence. He discovered that when he completely eliminated the need to make small, repetitive decisions, his mind was free to focus on truly important matters. More relevant still, he stopped constantly doubting himself. Most men don't realize it, but they live in a state of constant decision fatigue. From the moment they wake up until they sleep, they're making choices. What clothes to wear, what to eat, which route to take, how to respond to messages, which series to watch. Each of these micro-decisions consumes mental energy. And when your mental energy is low, you naturally start doubting bigger, more important choices. Schopenhauer observed something interesting. On days when he had to break his routine, trips, unexpected commitments, he felt less confident about everything. His opinions seemed less solid. His convictions became less firm. When he returned to the established routine, mental clarity and confidence returned. This led him to a powerful discovery about discipline and self-confidence. Truly confident men don't make 1,000 decisions per day. They automate as much of daily life as possible to preserve mental energy for what really matters. Think about the men you consider most confident and successful. Most have rigid routines. They wake up at the same time, exercise at the same hour, wear similar clothes, follow established patterns for mundane things. It's not out of laziness or lack of creativity. It's because they understood the same thing as Schopenhauer. The fewer unnecessary decisions you make, the more confident you become in decisions that really matter. External discipline, having routines, systems, established patterns, frees your mind to be creative and decisive where it's really worth it. But having external discipline is useless if you can't control the internal impulses that sabotage your plans. Sun Tzu spent years studying why some leaders command respect naturally, while others need to shout to be heard. In The Art of War, he documents his observations about commanders who won battles before they even began. He noticed something counterintuitive. The most effective generals were rarely the loudest or most dramatic. Men with real presence don't compete for attention. It comes naturally to them, but why? Sun Tzu identified that these leaders weren't trying to prove anything to anyone. They didn't need approval to feel secure. They didn't need to shout to be heard. They didn't need to threaten to be respected. This absence of need created something magnetic. People around them felt their inner security, and security is instinctively attractive. Sun Tzu documented this as a strategic principle. The supreme warrior wins without fighting, not because he avoids conflict, but because his presence alone already establishes his position. When you don't need to constantly prove value, when you're not anxious for validation, when you can stay comfortable in silence, people instinctively feel your inner strength. Genuine presence is the opposite of inflated ego. Ego needs stage, audience, constant performance. Real presence operates in energy-saving mode, maximum impact with minimum effort. The difference between trying to impress and simply being impressive is that the second option doesn't tire you out. It doesn't tire because it comes from internal completeness, not external neediness. Developing this natural presence requires something that goes against all modern masculine instincts. Stop trying to prove you deserve to be there and simply be there. Imagine a man being ridiculed publicly every day and never, not once, losing his composure. To the citizens of Ephesus, Heraclitus was an irritating mystery. They attacked him verbally, made cruel jokes, tried to provoke him in every possible way. And he simply listened and moved on. as if nothing had happened. People thought he was weak or cowardly. Actually, Heraclitus was demonstrating something few individuals can master, and what would become the key to unshakable inner security. He had developed the ability to hear criticism without being shaken, receive rejection without explaining why he should be accepted, be attacked without automatically retaliating. This ability didn't come from indifference, but from a deep understanding of how immediate emotional reactions destroy your strategic position. Heraclitus realized that when you react defensively to criticism, when you over-explain your choices, when you attack back immediately, you're communicating something specific, that your confidence depends on external opinion. Individuals truly secure in themselves have a strange characteristic. They're almost impossible to offend, not because they don't care, but because they don't need everyone to be wrong for them to feel right. This ability to absorb rejection without reacting emotionally becomes a strategic advantage. When you're not spending energy defending yourself, you can use that energy to understand what's really happening. Heraclitus transformed every criticism into useful information instead of personal attack. He perceived patterns others missed because he wasn't emotionally invested in proving his point. The philosopher developed something he called harmony of opposites, the ability to maintain internal balance regardless of external chaos. Achieving this equanimity in the face of rejection requires developing an internal foundation so solid that external storms can't shake it. Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching, his fundamental work on Eastern wisdom, something that exposes a massive waste of masculine energy. The wise do not fight, therefore they cannot be defeated. This seemingly contradictory phrase was born from his observation of how men waste vital force in conflicts that build nothing lasting. He identified a self-destructive pattern. We focus so much on winning small battles that we lose the bigger war. We spend energy arguing who's right in irrelevant situations. We fight for recognition in temporary contexts. We compete for positions that don't increase real strength. Lao Tzu realized that wise men operate with different perspective. They constantly ask themselves, is it worth spending my limited energy on this? Modern masculine conflicts follow this same destructive pattern. Men wasting vital force on issues that build nothing. When was the last time you spent hours discussing something that changed nothing in your real life? Processing offenses that didn't affect your concrete progress? Competing in games that didn't increase your objective value? The Taoist concept of wu wei, action without effort, doesn't mean laziness. It means choosing battles with surgical precision. It means saving energy for what really builds your life. Lao Tzu discovered that true strength isn't demonstrated by winning every small fight. It's demonstrated by knowing which fights are worth fighting. When you stop reacting to every provocation, when you don't feel obligated to defend your opinion in every conversation, when you can let others win irrelevant discussions, you free up an impressive amount of mental energy. This saved energy can be directed toward building things that really matter: skills, relationships, projects that increase your real value in the world. Choosing your battles requires renouncing the ego of always being right in favor of the strategy of always progressing. Confucius made a disturbing discovery when he began studying men who maintained respect over decades versus those who lost it quickly. He noticed there's a specific pattern that separates these two groups, and this pattern has nothing to do with intelligence, wealth, or social position. For years, observing the Chinese imperial court, he saw powerful ministers fall from grace, rich merchants lose influence, respected warriors become jokes. They all followed the same self-destructive pattern. What Confucius discovered was this: men who lose respect invariably start talking more than they do. They promise and don't deliver. They announce plans they don't execute. They make statements about themselves that their actions don't support. Gradually, people around them begin to notice the difference between what they say and what they actually deliver. On the other hand, men who maintain respect operate inversely. They do more than they talk. Confucius documented this as a fundamental principle. The superior man is modest in his words, but exceeds in his actions. Think about the men you really respect. They don't brag about future conquests. They don't need to announce every decision they make. They don't constantly explain how competent they are. They simply execute, and results speak for them. The difference is subtle but powerful. When you talk less about what you're going to do and simply do it, people start paying attention when you actually speak. Your words gain weight because they're rare and usually followed by action. Confucius realized there's an economy of credibility. Every unfulfilled promise is a debt. Every action delivered without fanfare is a credit. Confident men always operate with a positive balance in this account. This doesn't mean being mysterious or antisocial. It means that when you say you'll do something, people can bet it will happen. And when you don't announce something, they know you might be preparing a surprise. This silent reliability becomes a huge strategic advantage, because in a world where most individuals talk too much and deliver little, the one who delivers more than he promises automatically stands out. But maintaining this verbal discipline requires something that collides with our modern need for constant validation. There's a final test of self-control that few would pass. When Seneca was being forced to commit suicide by order of Nero, he did something that shocked everyone who witnessed his final moments. Instead of lamentations or pleas, he used his final hours to teach philosophy to friends present. He calmly discussed the nature of death, made jokes, even dictated some final reflections. The Roman soldiers charged with watching his execution were disturbed. They expected to see a powerful individual crumbling, begging for mercy, revealing his weakness when confronted with the end. Instead, they witnessed something they couldn't understand. Seneca was demonstrating the highest level of masculine control, absolute mastery over his emotional reactions, even in the worst circumstances. Most men lose emotional control in much less extreme situations. A criticism at work leaves them irritated for days. A romantic rejection makes them question their entire worth. A sarcastic comment triggers an automatic defensive response. Seneca developed something he called premeditatio malorum, the practice of imagining and mentally preparing for the worst possible scenarios, not out of pessimism, but for psychological preparation. For years, he literally mentally rehearsed how he would react to loss of fortune, social position, health, even life. When these events actually happened, his mind was already trained to respond with balance. This mental preparation created something powerful. He became emotionally unshakable, not because he didn't feel, but because his emotions didn't control his actions. Think about the practical difference of this. When you develop real emotional control, you can make decisions based on logic even when you're furious. You can maintain productive conversations even when you're hurt. You can negotiate effectively even when you're anxious. This self-control isn't repression. It's the ability to feel emotion completely, process it internally, and then consciously choose how to respond. Seneca realized that men who master their emotional reactions have a huge strategic advantage over those who are slaves to their own impulses. They can think clearly when others are panicking. They can act rationally when others are reacting emotionally. Emotional control becomes the foundation of confidence because you know you can trust yourself not to mess up when things get difficult. Machiavelli ended The Prince with an observation that sums up everything about authentic masculine confidence. After analyzing hundreds of leaders throughout history, he concluded, "There's one quality that separates truly powerful men from all others. It wasn't intelligence, because he knew geniuses who were destroyed politically. It wasn't wealth, because he saw rich men lose everything. It wasn't charisma, because he observed charismatic leaders fall from grace. The quality was something more fundamental, the ability to look at reality without filters of illusion. Weak men live in fantasy. They convince themselves they deserve things they haven't earned. They believe the world should reward them for good intentions. They expect life to be fair, people to be consistent, effort to always generate results. When reality doesn't match these expectations, they feel betrayed, bitter, victimized. Machiavelli realized that truly confident men operate differently. They see the world as it is, not as they'd like it to be. They accept that life is unfair, that people are inconsistent, that effort isn't always rewarded, that the best doesn't always win. This radical acceptance of reality doesn't make them cynical. It frees them, because when you stop fighting against the nature of the world and start working within it, you can focus all your energy on what you can really control: your choices, your reactions, your development, your strategies. You stop spending energy being outraged by injustices that have always existed. You stop being surprised when people act in their own interest. You stop being disappointed when plans don't work out as expected. Instead, you develop anti-fragility. You get stronger with adversity. You use rejections as information. You transform failures into learning. You treat obstacles as training. This Machiavellian mindset isn't about being cruel or manipulative. It's about being realistic and strategic. It's recognizing that genuine inner security doesn't come from expecting the world to be kind to you, But from knowing you can handle anything, it throws your way. Which of these rules caught your attention most? Comment on the video. And now you've seen a bit of what makes this philosophy so impactful. Click on the video on screen. You'll discover the deepest secrets these masters use to completely dominate their emotions and never let anything shake them again. Click now on the video on screen